Hello, and welcome to the weekly Pre-Shabbat AGJC Zoom call. Each week we gather together, the Jewish communities of all 6 GCC countries and our families and friends from around the world, to hear an inspirational message before Shabbat, light candles, hear a Dvar Torah, pray, and read a section from the weekly Torah portion. We have a special program for International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Our featured guests will be Evelyn Marcus, whose mother was Anne Frank's teacher in the transit camp, and Rosa Ziegers, child of a Holocaust survivor. The Association of Gulf Jewish Communities is the umbrella organization for the Jewish communities of the GCC countries that are building and enhancing Jewish life in the region. While each community is independent, we share a common goal and vision for Jewish life to flourish in the Gulf for the benefit of both residents and visitors. To stay updated on AGJC events, please follow us on Twitter at GulfJewish and visit our website www.gulfjewish.org. Shabbat Shalom, and continue to pray for peace to prevail around the world.
Thank you so much, Shuda. And now I'll turn over to Alex, who's going to say the Kel Malei Rachamim.
Kel Malei Rachamim, shochein b'meromim, ha'ametzei menucha nechona, ale kanefei השכינה במעלות קדושים וטובים כזוהר רקיע מאירים ומזהירים לנשמות 6 מיליוני אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים, ילדות וילדים וילדות, שנהרגו, שנשחטו, שנשרפו, שנחנקו, שנטבעו ושנקברו חיים בידי הנאצים ועוזריהם, יימח שמם. באושוויץ, מיידנק, טרבלינקה, מטוזון ובשאר מחנות ההשמדה, ושמסרו את נפשם על קדושת השם, בעבור שאנו מתפללים לעיול נשמותיהם, לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם בגן עדן מנוחתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
Thank you, Alex. And I will turn to Cheryl, who's going to light this week's Shabbat candles.
Cheryl, can you unmute yourself?
That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Okay. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידשנו ובשרתו וציוונו לעד תגמול של שבת. אמן. שבת שלום.
Amen. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And now we'll turn back to Alex, who's going to lead us in the Chadodi.
לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה שמו וזכור בדיבורך תשמיענו אל עמיוך אדוני קדוש מועד תפארת ולתהילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה שמור וזכור בדיבורך תשמיענו אל I thought I did that כי מקורה ברכה מראש מקדם נסוך מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת מקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלך ומצאי מתוך אף חרב לך שבט ויקבך אחמול עלייך חמלה דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה ימים ושמאל תפרעתי ואת אדוני תריצי על יד איש בן פרסי ונשמחה ונגילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי בשלום את בעלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה לך לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה.
Thank you so much, Alex. And now we'll turn to Ambassador Nae, who's going to introduce today's speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Before I introduce Rosa, I'll just tell a small story about the candle lighting, because we used Rosa's mother, candelabra, who she kept in the family, buried in the ground before she had to go on hiding, and dug it out at the end of the war. And before she passed away, she asked me to keep it. So since then, it's in our family, and we use it to light the candles. Rosa and myself know each other since I was 16, but our family goes back to pre-war days. Rosa's mother and my aunt went to school together when the family was taken away. The parents were very good friends. Rosa will tell the story, but small anecdote, it's because of Rosa that I joined the foreign ministry. She was the first one who raised the issue back in 1979. And here is Rosa, a good family friend, like a sister, and of course Evelyn. And I am looking forward to hear their story and for you to listen to their very, very unique story. Rosa, Evelyn, with love.
Thank you so much, Eitan. Thank you, Huda. Thank you, everybody, for having us on this special day. Can you hear us well? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so today is the UN proclaimed International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And as somebody already mentioned in the chat, how ironic that today Israel is facing court about whether they would have, how do you call that, performed genocide. I guess it's the irony of our people, le dor vador, right? And so Huda and the entire association, thank you for letting this day not be forgotten. My story is indeed very closely interwoven with Eitan's story. My mom was Jewish. My dad, by the way, was not Jewish. But as I always tell everybody, my mom was triple Jewish. There was no doubt in her mind that I would grow up as a Jewish girl. She was born in Holland, in the Netherlands, in a tiny town close to the German border. And she was the second daughter of a family of four. Her dad had owned a butcher store. Her mom came from Russia, where she fled the pogroms with her entire family. As a result, her Russian grandmother and father also lived in the house, and also her 5-year-old older sister. My mom was 12 when the Germans marched into the Netherlands, and life changed for all the Jews there. 2 years into that occupation, my mom was now 14 years of age. She came home from school one day to find the house empty. Her dad, her mom, her sister, and her grandparents were not there. The house was demolished. And it turned out there was a raid on the house. The Germans had broken in, had taken her entire family. And here she was, a 14-year-old girl, obviously very, very in shock and afraid. She didn't know what to do. And so, as she later would tell me, she did the stupidest thing in hindsight, which was she stayed the night with all the lights on, and she hid in a cabinet under the kitchen sink. So the next day, a close family friends of her parents, those were quite influential Jews in the Jewish town, in the town of Almelo, the Dutch town, heard that there was a raid in the house. And so he came to check out the house, found it empty, obviously, but found my mom crying in the cabinet under the kitchen sink. He took her out and he took her in to his family. He had 5 children, one of which was Eitan's mom, who was one of my mom's best friends. So now my mom was part of the De Groot family with the 5 kids. The De Groot family decided a couple of months later that it was time for the entire family to go into hiding. And so at that point, they handed my mom to the Dutch resistance. And so from that day onwards, for the following 3 years, my mom was in hiding, and she saw 15 different hiding addresses. Every time it became too dangerous, and so it was decided that she had to move on to the next address. There are stories after stories about narrow escapes, how she would lie in a cornfield. She was very small, and how she would hide in between the corn, and a German regiment would march over her and just not notice her, and she would survive. And so she would survive for 3 years in a row and 15 hiding addresses. In 1945, as the Germans were defeated and the Netherlands were liberated, she came out of hiding. She was now 17 years old, only to find that her entire family was murdered. Not only her direct family, but her entire extended family from both sides. By the way, it was a very Orthodox family on both sides, her father and her mother. All the brothers and sisters, all the uncles, all the nieces, nephews, everybody was murdered. And here she was, alone. What was amazing was that the De Groot family, Eitan Nae's family, made it out of hiding, surviving with all of the 5 kids and the parents, and I believe Eitan even the grandparents. I might be mistaken. She tried to get back and be with them, but that was not allowed by, at that point, the authorities, because they found one distant relative of my mom, and so my mom was forced to live with that distant family. Eitan's family, the De Groot family, decided to make Aliyah, to go to Israel with all of them. As you probably know, they were the true pioneers. I believe they moved to Israel around 46, and they were the people that moved the boulders from the swamp, built the cities, and were truly part of the DNA of Israel. They asked my mom to join them, and she would have loved to do so, but she had a medical condition that was caused by the war that made her physically, medically unfit. She didn't pass the test. And so she stayed behind. She followed a nursing training. She became later truly one of the best nurses in the country. She met my dad, they married, they got me. And I grew up with the notion that I have no family, but that there was this distant family that was a chosen family that was called the De Groot family, who lived in Israel. So sometimes there would be these airmail letters with these little black and white pictures that were sent that meant nothing to me, quite frankly. Until I was 18 in 1978, my mom decided it was time for me and her to travel to Israel for the first time. And of course, who was at the airport to pick us up? Judith, Eitan's mom. And so she took us from the airport. It was the first time I met her. We drove to Kiryat Bialik, this little town in the neighborhood of Haifa, where Judith lived with her husband and 2 kids. And here I met this young guy called Eitan that I could not communicate with because I thought he didn't speak English, and vice versa, he thought I didn't speak English. And frankly, my mother didn't speak English. And so Judith, his mom, became the translator between her family, Hebrew, and my family, my mom and I, Dutch. And of course, Judith spoke both. And I very much remember one day Judith, Eitan's mom, saying to Eitan, take them away. It's almost Shabbat. I need to prepare for Shabbat. I need quiet in the house. Take them to the pool. And so sure enough, Eitan takes us to the pool. I was not looking forward to spending a day with somebody that I could not communicate with. But at some point, through gestures, he said, let's go into the pool, making gestures. And so we stepped into the pool, and all of a sudden, in English, he says, nice water, huh? And I said, what, you speak English? And he said, you speak English? And so all of a sudden, we discovered we both could communicate with each other. At that point, I was in the country for a week, and I was full with questions. What about the Arabs? What about the history? What about Israel's, etc.? And Eitan, with his 16 years of age, turned out to be the most knowledgeable, the most passionate, the most well-spoken defender and advocate for Israel and its history and the Middle East, that we stood in that pool for 4 hours, literally 4 hours, and Eitan giving me Israel and Middle East education. And indeed, at that point, apparently, I don't remember this, Eitan said to me, I said to Eitan, apparently, you should become an ambassador for Israel. Clearly, he listened to me, because here we are, 70 years, 80 years late? No, not even, 40 years later. And sure enough, he became, I believe, the youngest ambassador to Israel. And I'm so proud of him. And I'm so proud to call him my family. There are more stories, but I believe my time is up. So I'll leave it here. But I will for always be thankful to Ethan and his family for what he did for mine. Thank you. Over to Evelyn.
Yeah, my name is Evelyn Marcus. I'm also from the Netherlands originally. My father and my mother were both Jewish Holocaust survivors. They're no longer alive. So they were 18 years and 20 years old when the Germans occupied the Netherlands in 1940. They met each other a few months after that and fell in love. About a year later, my father and his family decided to go into hiding because the regulations against the Jews became tighter and tighter. And they found hiding places mostly with evangelical Christian Jews in the rural areas of the Netherlands who risked their own life to save Jews out of religious principles. My mother's family decided not to try to go into hiding because they thought the risk of being betrayed by some Dutch person who would receive 7.5 guilders if they would betray a Jew to the Germans, the risk of being betrayed was too high. So they thought we better obey the Germans and wait and see what will happen. So my father and his brother were hiding in the north of the country, and my mother was sticking at home, and until it didn't work. Their policy didn't work. So at some point in 1943, they were rounded up and transported to the Dutch collection camp for Jews in the north of the country. So that camp was, of course, not fun, but it was not as bad as what we later, what they later learned. So there was some food and there was some hygiene and there was even a school for kids. And that was because the Germans wanted to let everything seem as normal as possible. And my mother, who was a young school teacher, was assigned with running that school. So every Tuesday, a train would arrive that would take hundreds of people, or even hundreds of people further east, out of the Netherlands to Eastern Europe. And nobody knew where those trains were going, but my mother always said we knew it was not good. And those trains would go to the extermination camps and the concentration camps in Germany, Poland, etc., in Eastern Europe. So that was every Tuesday, and my grandfather tried to keep him and his family off the list of passengers for the next train on Tuesday, and he succeeded week by week. So my mother ran that school for a long time, and at some point, Anne Frank was one of her pupils, her students. And my mother would always say to me, Anne Frank, at that time, that was nothing special because there were so many Anne Franks. There were so many girls and boys of that age who would be in her class, and then 1 or 2 or 3 weeks later, or 3 months later, they didn't show up anymore because they were taken by the Tuesday train further eastwards, as it happened with Anne Frank. My grandfather succeeded to keep his family off the passenger list of the Tuesday train until 1944. in September 1944, they were also transported to the east, and they ended up in Bergen-Belsen. And there, the situation was much worse. There was hardly any. There was one piece of bread that was the whole ration for the day. There was no hygiene. Everybody was very, very ill. And my mother and her family, they all caught illnesses like typhus, and there were lice. So they caught typhus, and they got tuberculosis. And then in April 1945, the Allied forces were closing in on the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and the Germans wanted to erase all living evidence of their crime, their genocide. So they shipped the remaining Jews that were alive, like my family, they shipped them further east to bring them to gas chambers. There were no gas chambers in Bergen-Belsen, and they had to kill them fast. So they sent them eastwards. So my mother was with her family in a train with 2,400 Jews going eastwards in the direction of a gas chamber. But the Allied forces had already moved forward. So right before they reached that goal, the 9th American Army liberated that train. That was on April 13, 1945. My mother would always wear a penny with her. I still have it. That says 9th American Army, April 13, 1945. And we would always, in our family, my mother would always celebrate with us April 13. It's a special day in our family where we thank the Americans and celebrate our freedom. And then my mother passed away and my father passed away. They found each other back in 1945. My mom and my dad, and got married in 1946. And my father passed away in 2012, my mother in 2014. So we start to clear the house, and we find a letter that my mother had written to my father on 6 weeks after her liberation from that train by the Americans. And she writes that she had learned that from somebody she met that my father was still alive, her fiancé by that time, and that she was so grateful for that. And she also described in detail her liberation by the Americans. We find that letter, and I take it, we find it in 2014, a week after she passed away. I take it to America.
Where we lived by that time.
Where we lived by that time. And we share it with a friend, an American, and he said, I think I know people who want to make a documentary and would be interested in that story of the liberation by the Americans. So I shared the letter, and in 2015, a documentary team approached me and made a documentary called Never Again Is Now. It tells the story of my parents, and it also tells the story of today's anti-Semitism, which in 2015 was rising like crazy in the in Europe, since 2000 actually. Since the second Intifada, it was rising like crazy in Europe. That was also when I became active against anti-Semitism. And when Rosa and I, a few years after that, decided to immigrate to the United States and leave Europe. So the documentary is about the story of my parents, about today's anti-Semitism in Europe, also about today's anti-Semitism that was added a bit later on, today's anti-Semitism in the United States. And it is in the documentary, I interview a couple of thought leaders and opinion leaders about the cause and the remedy for that. So, as a daughter of Holocaust survivors, I couldn't look away from today's anti-Semitism, and I have a weekly podcast about anti-Semitism on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, called Never Against Now podcast.
Thank you so much both for speaking with us today. First off, if you want, you're welcome to drop a link in the chat for people to follow your podcast. I'm sure many people here would love to do so. And especially in times like these, we say, never forget, but the way to never forget is to keep telling the stories of those who went through the Shoah. So we really appreciate you taking the time and speaking with us today. And now it's really an honor for us as well to have Rabbi Shudrick with us. Some of us may remember Rabbi Shudrick actually visited Dubai for the Shabbat before the Pope came back in 2019 to Abu Dhabi. I know he spent Shabbat with the Jewish community in the villa back then. And he's also obviously the chief rabbi of Poland. And so what more auspicious week to have him join us than this one. So we'll ask him to share some words with us as well.
Okay, thank you very much. And I hope, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Okay, good. Because I'm on a train right now. I'm going from Warsaw to Krakow in order to spend Shabbos in Krakow. So right after Shabbos, I can get in a car and to be in Auschwitz tomorrow night for the International Day of Remembrance for the Shoah, for the Holocaust. So and I just hope that the link, that my Wi-Fi keeps working. And there's so much to say. But there's just one thing I want to say, and I'm going to follow up on what these two wonderful speakers just spoke about, and that is, what are we supposed to do today? This day is different than the other ones, because after October 7th, we have never seen this kind of anti-Semitism since before World War II, or during World War II, during the Shoah. So what are we supposed to do as individuals? And it really all goes to the all-known statement that for evil to succeed, it isn't about what the evil people do, it's when good people are quiet. It is absolutely our obligation. Our here means everyone who is a moral human being. Jew, non-Jew, believer, non-believer, every moral human being has the obligation to speak out. Now, how am I supposed to speak out? That would have been a bigger challenge 20, 30, 40 years ago, because not everyone had a platform. Today, everyone has a platform. And maybe what I'm going to say now is going to seem very trite. Everyone has a smartphone, almost everyone. My mom's husband, who's 95, has a regular cell phone. He doesn't have a smartphone. But my mom at 92 does have a smartphone. Everyone can take their smartphone, make a recording, post it on Facebook, Instagram, X, whichever you want to do, or all of the above. And can you imagine, even just the people on this call right now, if everybody, every day, except for Shabbos, would post 30 seconds about how they feel about October 7th, how you feel that Jewish women are raped and there's no outrage from those people who brave and fight for women's rights, and we support them. Where is their voice? And Holocaust survivors being kidnapped out of their homes, young people, and music, everyone knows the story, but you cannot be silent. And the amazing thing is we today, 2024, every person can speak out. Take your smartphone, make a recording, 30 seconds a day. Everybody does it. We can begin to change the world for better. I have a deep belief that when we are together, that we can succeed. And I just want to end that it's a time when we sometimes feel alone. And we are alone, but we're not. Because we have as many as people who are saying horrible things. There are also lots of our non-Jewish friends and colleagues who are speaking out against the horrors of Hamas. And here I have to say, just 2 nights ago, I was at a reception. I met the ambassador of the UAE. He was more outspoken about the horrors of Hamas, more than I am, but he also. So we have lots of friends out there, not enough. But every time one of us posts, maybe we make one more friend. We empower another person to speak out. Our greatest challenge now is not to be silent. And when we do that, we pay the deepest tribute and memory to the Holocaust victims and the Holocaust survivors. And that's our obligation today. Keep speaking out. Am Yisrael Chai, and Shabbat Shalom to all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi Shudrick, for joining us, especially as you're in transit. And we hope you'll be able to join us again in the future. And now I'll turn it to Alex, who's going to read this week's Parsha.
Rabbi Shudrick, when we started this call, we never thought that somebody is going to talk to us from a train between Krakow and Warsaw. So that's all.
Alex, you need to unmute.
I was just saying to Rabbi Shudrick that when we started this call on AGJC, we never thought that we're going to have somebody talk to us from in a train between Warsaw and Krakow, or Krakow and Warsaw. I don't know exactly the direction. Shabbat Shalom and thank you.
Warsaw to Krakow. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. ויסר את עוף על מחכבותיו, וינגעו בכבדות, ויאמר מצרים, אנוסו מפני ישראל, כי אדוני נלחם להם במצרים. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, נטה את ידך לים, וישובו המים על מצרים, על רכבו ועל פרשיו. ויית משה את ידו על הים. וישב הים לפנות בוקר לאיתנו, ומצרים נסים לקראתו, וינער אדוני את מצרים בתוך הים, וישובו המים, ויכסו את הרכב ואת הפרשים לכל חיל פרעה הבאים אחריהם בים, לא נשאר בהם עד אחד, ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים, והמים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. And now we'll turn back to Cheryl, who's going to read the English translation.
Okay. God locked the wheels of their chariots so that they moved forward with difficulty. And the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for Elohim is fighting for them against Egypt." And Elohim said to Moses, "Hold out your arm over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians and upon their chariots and upon their riders." Moses held out his arm over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal state, and the Egyptians fled at its approach. But Elohim hurled the Egyptians into the sea. The waters turned back and covered the chariots and the riders, Pharaoh's entire army that followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. But the Israelites had marched through the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. And on that note, Am Yisrael Chai and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And now we'll head to Chaim, who's going to recite the Chief Rabbi of the UK's prayer.
Chaim, can you unmute, please?
Sure, sorry. Hello. First of all, nice to see some faces that I recognize, and thank you very much for the words earlier. I was very touched. I'm a grandchild of Holocaust survivors. My Sab and Savta survived Auschwitz, and grandmother survived Plaszow, and this is very meaningful. Thank you. Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, באנו לפניך בתפילה ובתחנונים, תמהים ושבורי לב על המכות האכזריות אשר הוכתה ארצנו הקדושה ועמך ישראל ביום אשר הפכה חגנו לאבל. אנו מתאבלים על אבדן מאות אנשים, נשים וטף אשר נרצחו בזדון ומתפללים על נפשותם. אבינו מלכנו, שלח רפואה שלמה לאלפי פצועי עמך. אבינו מלכנו, רחם על אחינו השבויים והוציאם מאפלה וצל מוות לגאולה. בזכותיהם תפתח וממצוקותיהם הצילם והשיבם מהרה לחיק משפחותיהם. אבינו מלכנו, הגן על משפחות ישראל מאימת מוות, וחזק חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל אשר שמים נפשם בכפם והצביעם לקראת אויבינו. אבינו מלכנו, אשר בידך לב מלכים ושרים, תקן בעצה טובה מפניך את שרי ישראל, לנצח במלחמתם, כדי שיהיו תושביה שננים מעין מחריד. אבינו מלכנו, פרוס סוכת שלומך על יושבי ארצך, ככתוב, נתתי שלום בארץ ושכבתם בעין מחריד, והשבתי חיה רעה מן הארץ, וחרב לא תעבור בארצכם. ברכנו אבינו בביטחון ושלווה, ושים שלום אמיתי וקיים על מדינת ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ארצך. עושה שלום ממרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
Thank you, Chaim. And now we'll head to Jean, who's going to read the prayer for the GCC.
Thank you, Ariella. And I want to thank today's speakers for the testimony, and also to the rabbi and to everyone on this call. It's an honor to be with you today. May he who gives salvation to kings and dominion to princes, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, who delivers his servant David from the evil sword, who makes a way in the sea and a path through the mighty waters, bless and protect, guard and help, exalt, magnify and uplift His Majesties, the King of Saudi Arabia, the King of Bahrain, the Sultan of Oman, the President of the UAE, the Emir of Kuwait, the Emir of Qatar, and all of their crown princes. And may the Supreme King of Kings, in his mercy, put a spirit of wisdom and understanding into their hearts, and into the hearts of all of their counselors and officials, to deal kindly with us, the house of Jacob, and all of the people of this land. May be their shelter and stronghold, and let them not falter. In their days and in hours, may these lands be blessed with stability, prosperity, and peace. May this be his will, and let us say Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Jean. And before I turn it back to Chaim, who will usher us out with Shalom Aleichem, just a quick reminder to please join us, same time, same place, and same Zoom link next week. We'll actually have the opportunity to hear from a survivor of one of the kibbutzim from October 7th. So we ask that you please join us and that you share it with your family and with your friends. You know, as we say, never forget. It's the same really for October 7th, and to perpetuate the stories of those who were murdered and who were taken hostage. And so we just ask that you please join us next week, because all of us joining here will give immense support to him. So please join us again, same time, same Zoom link. And now I'll turn it to Chaim.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachi Asharet, Malachi Elyon. Mi melech malachi hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu. Boachem l'shalom malachi hashalom malachi elyon. Mi melech malachi hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu. B'chuni l'shalom malachi hashalom malachi elyon. Mi melech malachi hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu. Tzedchem l'shalom malachi hashalom malachi elyon. Ni melech malachi hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.